Okay. Let's see. 1 sec. Here we go. Okay. Parshas Chayei Sara, page 106. We're going to go back to the very beginning, and we're going to take a second look. We did a number of years ago Chayei Sara, the opening, what the first Aliyah, what the Rav had to say. I think it's deserving a second look, and let's analyze it. As an introduction, the Rav makes an observation that really is the introduction to the opening Aliyah of Chayei Sara. He notes that Avram is going to live another 38 years beyond Chayei Sara. He's going to die at 175. But he notes that those 38 years are marked by only two events. Those two events are, number one, the purchase of Maras HaMachpelah for the burial for his wife. And what's number two? That's really going to occupy more than anything else in Chayei Sara, and that is the second story. That is finding Rivka as the wife for Yitzchak to replace Sarah as the matriarch. The Rav says, the Torah tells us nothing else about Avraham because the covenant was entrusted to two people, a man and a woman. If the latter is missing, the story of the covenantal community comes to a temporary
in the
halt.
afternoon, I get a recording of this if you want to listen to it.
Okay. Ladies, you got to be mute. Mute yourself, please. Okay? Okay.
I should be permanently muted.
Hello? Can you mute? Okay, thank you. No. Okay? Okay. So the Rav notes that as soon as Sarah dies, the covenantal community, in other words, the role of Avram is, if you will, temporary. You have to have a man and a woman. You have to have the avos and the imahos working together. And it's drastically curtailed when the partner isn't there. So it's true, the Rav notes, after Sarah's death, Avram only does two things, because it's telling us those last 38 years were nothing like the previous years of his life, because he had a partner named Sara, and the covenantal community requires both a man and a woman. Now, the Rav reads this story in front of us in Chayei Sara as not only a story about a purchase of a grave, but by the way, you will see that the Rav deduces from this story halachot, an approach to Jewish burial. How does a Jewish cemetery look? We learn it from Chayei Sara. I remember hearing this from the Rav personally in a shir by the Rav, and the Rav said, from this story of Chayei Sara, we know exactly how to make a cemetery, a Jewish cemetery look, and what it requires. But outside of that, there's something else happening. What else is happening at the very beginning of Chayei Sara? The Torah is giving the Torah's eulogy for Sarah. In other words, we are going to hear what the Torah surmises, if you will, feels about Sarah. Who was this Sarah Imenu? What was her greatness? What was her uniqueness? What was her eulogy? And the Torah gives it to us. So we're going to get an insight who to Sarah herself was. Let's take a look at the very beginning of the parsha. The Sarah's lifetime was 100 years, 20 years, and 7 years, the years of Sarah's life. It's a very funny, constructed pasuk. And everybody asks this question, from Rashi, from the Medrash, down to the modern commentaries. Why does the word shana, shana, shana appear after every numerical amount describing the lifetime of Sarah, right? So Rashi quotes the Medrash in Bereshis Rabbah that says, she was 100, when she was 100, she was like 20 with regards to sin, because up to 20, you are not considered a sinful person. You're not judged. That's what the Gemara says. At 20, she had the beauty of a 7-year-old. That sounds, a 7-year-old has a beauty? So I remember a Rebbe of mine in high school saying, a child's beauty is real beauty. There's no makeup. There's no, it's real, it's sincere, it is beauty. When you see a child, it's genuine. That child, if a child is gorgeous, that's no makeup. That's really the child. That's really the beauty, the real beauty. And he said that's what Chazal means, that she had the beauty, that real innate beauty. She didn't have to get up in the morning and put on makeup. I remember my Rebbe saying that. That was Sarah. Sarah's beauty. That's what the Medrash means. At 20, she had the beauty of a 7-year-old. And then the Medrash ends by saying, very important word. It says, Sarah's age was replete with goodness throughout her entire lifetime. All of the years were tov. All of the years were good. Now, the Rav wants to analyze those words. And the Rav understood this comment to mean that Sarah was a unique, here's the eulogy that the Torah is giving. This is HaKadosh Baruch Hu's eulogy. So tell me, is it true? Is it objective or subjective truth? It must be objective truth. All our truth, that what we say, what we see is subjective. But when HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the narrator, it is objective truth. So the Torah is giving us objective truth, isn't it? It's giving us the truth of who Sarah really was. And the Rav understood this comment of the Torah, that Sarah was a unique human being, because she combined all the good features that the Medrash is saying throughout her entire life. In other words, throughout her life, it didn't matter how old she was or how young she was. She had a maturity of 100-year-old, and she had, which 100-year-old possesses cautiousness, right? Possesses cautious wisdom, sober judgment. And yet she never lost her child's inquisitiveness, idealism, honesty, and sincerity. That's what a child has. So she had both. She had the maturity of an adult, and yet the inquisitiveness, the sincerity, the idealism, the honesty of a child. She was simultaneously, the Rav says, very young and very old, combined into one human being. That's who she was. Her entire lifetime was a combination of an adult and a child, all wrapped into one. Sarah was concurrently 7, 20, and 100 simultaneously. She combined the child, the adult, and the old age into a unified personality. That's what's important. I would say the operative word is a unified personality. She wasn't a divided person. She wasn't sometimes the adult and sometimes the child. At the same time, the Torah is telling us that she was an adult, she was a child. She combined both elements. She never lost her inquisitiveness, her idealism, and yet she had a sober judgment as well. So often, the aged person destroys the youthful tendency that they have, and the young person does not allow the maturity of an older person to express itself, right? Quite often, young children don't have that ability, and older people squash their youthfulness. Sarah and Abraham as well, by the way, the Torah tells us, combined both of these elements, and they did not allow them to conflict with each other. She wasn't a torn person. She was all good throughout her life. She wasn't a conflicted person. She was a totally balanced person. The Rav, however, didn't leave this only as a description of Sarah. He says, fascinating, the Rav says, this reflects on Klal Yisrael. It's the DNA of the Jewish people. And here the Rav writes, there are 3 mitzvot that play a central role in our religious life. As a religious Jew, Talmud Torah, study of Torah, prayer, and emunah, faith. The zaken, the old person, is considered wise because he has more opportunities and more hours to spend in the tent of Torah. This is why we equate a zaken in Jewish thinking with chachma, with wisdom, with age. Maturity is an important element in the study of Torah. For an immature mind cannot study. It cannot analyze. It cannot infer. As far as Talmud Torah, the mature adult, the trained mind is the ideal person. But the scene changes completely, the Rav notes, when we turn to prayer and we pour out our hearts before God. The adult, the proud mind, the independent thinker does not know the art of prayer. While Talmud Torah requires self-affirmation and self-appreciation, prayer, tefillah, demands from us self-negation. The mood that generates a desire for tefillah is one of hopelessness, of bankruptcy. To pray means to surrender one's pride and self-confidence, to put aside an awareness of the greatness, the freedom, and independence. Prayer is for those who are capable of a complete trust in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's exactly what you're doing, praying. You're turning and saying, I can't do it alone. I need you, right? That's a totally different thinking. But then there's a third, another very important religious act, which only the young child is really capable of performing. That is emunah. Faith in God requires a suspension of judgment, the surrender not only of the body, but also of the mind. Emunah sometimes confronts us with a challenge to suspend our judgment, to act even though we do not understand why we are acting in a certain way. We have faith in God. In other words, that is a suspension of judgment. Talmud Torah requires adulthood. Prayer and faith require the childhood. We must be ready for both, capable of assuming the identity of either a child or an adult. The Talmud says the coin issued by Abraham had images of an old man and a woman, an old man and woman on one side of the coin, and the images of a young boy and a girl on the other. What does the Gemara mean in Baba Kama Tzadi Zion on the base, 97b? Sara and Abraham merged together. They were old and young at the same time. That's what Chazal is teaching us. What a eulogy from HaKadosh Baruch Hu for Abraham and for Sarah and for Klal Yisrael. Klal Yisrael has to imitate that balance between being old on the one hand and combined the youth on the other, to be young on the one hand and combined sober judgment on the other. And it's interesting when the Rav considered Rav Chaim Heller, the Gadol Hador. Rav Chaim Heller was a Rav he met in Germany when the Rav went for his PhD at the University of Berlin. Rav Chaim Heller was a genius of geniuses. And Rav Chaim Heller, like the Rav, were able to escape before the Nazis took over Germany, and he came to New York. And the Rav would learn with him every week. He would go, before he would go to Yeshiva University, he would come into from Boston, and he would go and have a chavrusa with Chaim Heller. He knew Chaim Heller because Chaim Heller was running a yeshiva for the most outstanding, brilliant minds. The people that studied in Chaim Heller's yeshiva included the Rav and the Lubavitcher Rebbe. That's where they knew each other. They all migrated to the Chaim Heller. So when Chaim Heller died, the Rav was the one who gave the hesped. And the Rav said, how am I to describe Rav Chaim Heller? He said he called him, like the Gemara says, Koton, Hillel HaKoton, Hillel the small one. And these were the words of the Rav. Childish means inquisitiveness. A child is excited by all the discoveries he makes. So too was Rav Heller. He never lost this characteristic. Sara Imenu had the same type of personality. She never lost her inquisitiveness. She could have been 127. When she was 127, she was as inquisitive as a little child. She never lost her childhood in desire to know. You ever watch a child when they learn for the first time something? My granddaughter, my youngest granddaughter, Sari, just turned 1 year old. So my son-in-law captured, they gave her for the first time cake, a cupcake, in honor of her first birthday. And he did it in 4 panels, 4 shots. She looks at the cake, because this is the first time she's seeing this item, and she looks inquisitively. And then she lifts it. You see her lifting it. And then she puts it in her mouth. And the 4th is a big smile. Like I said, once you've eaten the cake, it's all over, But it was, right, that inquisitiveness, right? She had to analyze it. She had to, what is this that you put in front of me? And right, at the end, she was very happy with it. Tasted great. But, it was fascinating. That child turns over right? They want to know, what is this? What is this? What is this? That's the inquisitiveness of a child. And Rav Soloveitchik notes, Sara Imenu, the Torah is telling us, had the fusion of an adult, sober judgment and a child's inquisitiveness all wrapped into one. That's the opening. So if I ask you, who is Sarah? How would you define a here? Here's a piece of paper. Here's a pen. Write in your own words, who was Sarah Imenu based on this pasuk? Now you could tell me, Rav Soloveitchik says. The Torah is saying she was a unified personality. She wasn't a split personality. She was able to take childhood and adulthood and merge it into one. That is a unified person. That's the ultimate. And that's, the Rav says, our model for Klal Yisrael. We are to be the same. Okay, that's the opening pasuk. Now take a look at the next pasuk. Vatama Sara b'kriyas arba hi Chevron be'eretz Canaan. Vayavo Avram lispod l'Sara b'livkosa. This pasuk gives us an insight into how to mourn, but also it gives us an insight into the thinking of Avram. Avram chooses one place to bury his wife. What is it? It's called Kiryat Arba. Vatama Sara b'Kiryat Arba. What's Kiryat Arba? The Marat HaMachpelah. Why Kiryat Arba? It's called this name because it's the city of four. And Rashi, quoting the Medrash, says, because four couples were destined to be buried there. Adam and Chava were already buried there. Avram, now Sarah, and eventually Avram, Yitzchak and Rivka, Yaakov and Leah. What's crucial for Avram is that he wants the burial place where he's going to bury his wife and eventually himself, and it's going to be for the other avos and imahos. It has to be where? The same burial place that Adam and Chava were buried. That's essential to Avram. And the Rav explained, why is he so motivated to be buried? Why does the Jewish cemetery, if you will, the ultimate Jewish cemetery, because I point out, by the way, historically, it is the only burial site that is undebated. It is not controversial. We know for a fact that Ma'aras HaMachpelah is where our avos and imos are buried. That is the place. Nobody debates that. Rachel Imenu, Kever Rachel, we don't know if Rachel's really buried there. There's a whole debate among scholars. David HaMelech, we don't know where David HaMelech is buried. Yosef, they say they know the Kever of Yosef in Shechem. Do we really know that that's the Kever of Yosef? We call it Kever of Yosef, Yosef's burial, but we don't know for certain. Here, Ma'aras HaMachpelah has been historically our property, our burial, our most important historic, outside of Yerushalayim, historic place in Israel for the Jewish people. Interesting, if you remember years and years ago, when the present president, Herzog's father, was ambassador to the UN for Israel, if you remember that, and then he became president. The president, Isaac Herzog's father, Chaim, became president after he was ambassador for Israel to the UN. And what had happened was there was a riot in Maras HaMachpelah. This was after 67. There was a riot, and the Arabs burnt the Beit HaKnesset. You've been to Maras HaMachpelah. You know there's a Beit HaKnesset between what they call Yitzchak's kever and Avram's, right, Rachel, whatever. Right there, there's the Beit Knesset in the middle. And they burnt the Sidurim and the Chumashim and a Sefer Torah. And it went to the UN. It was a whole debate at the Security Council because Israel cracked down and appropriately cracked down. And there was a whole debate. How could Israel take this? This is not only important to the Jewish people, but it's important to the Muslims. And eventually, Ambassador Herzog at the time xeroxed the opening aliyah of Chayei Sara, literally xeroxed it, and he presented it as Exhibit A. He says, ladies and gentlemen, do you want to know why this is important to the Jews? It's here in our document called the Bible. The Old Testament documents that this was purchased by our forefather Abraham. That's why this land, this position, Hebron is important to the Jews. Remember, Hebron was the first capital of the Jewish people, way before Yerushalayim. David was the king in Hebron for 7 years. Then he moved the capital to Yerushalayim. Hebron is this place. But why Kiryat Arba? Kiryat Arba, because 4 people were buried here. What's crucial is to understand why Avram was so motivated that he needed to have the same cemetery where Adam and Chava are buried. And the Rav explained that Avram wanted to be buried in the site of Adam and Chava, and I quote the Rav, that demonstrated there was no gap between universal human dignity and the Jewish covenantal sanctity. That's worth repeating. Yeah. That demonstrated there's no gap between universal human dignity and Jewish covenantal sanctity. The Rav felt that this underscores the view that the Jewish people are to have pertaining to our participation in the world around us. We are to contribute our talents, the Rav said, to all universal issues, to help resolve universal crises. Or in the words of the Rav, and I quote him, the universal problems faced by humanity are also faced by the Jew. Famine, disease, war, oppression, materialism, atheism, permissiveness, pollution of the environment. All these are problems which history has imposed not only on the general community, but also on the covenantal community. We have no right to tell the rest of mankind that these problems are exclusively theirs. It's just as much ours as theirs. I keep on telling you this. I've told you this numerous times. I told it to you back in our shir on Lech Lecha. The Rav is the only Gadol Hador, the only Rosh Yeshiva that spoke like this. Nobody else looked with the world with those eyes. Meaning the Jew is part of humanity and he must devote his talents. It wasn't just verbiage. This led to a philosophy of engagement in the world that the Rav encouraged and underwrote as important philosophically to the Jew. The Rav Zal taught an approach that rings in our ears in light of the new manifestations of anti-Semitism in the world, right? Its ugly head has reappeared, and we as Jews can't ignore it, in particular what's happening in New York with the recent election. And the Rav said, and it's worthy remembering, as human beings, Jews are duty-bound to contribute to the general welfare, regardless of the treatment accorded to them by society. We don't suddenly disappear because we don't like the results. Just the opposite. We remain involved, and we have to be involved. And that's what Kiryat Arba, this pasuk, Sara b'Kiryat Arba hi Hebron, is not an accident. He wants us to have this cemetery as our major burial place because Adam and Chava are buried there. There is human dignity that goes in hand with Jewish dignity. Now, continue on. So he buys Hebron. He's going to buy Maras HaMachpelah in a few minutes. But what happens then? We're told a fascinating verse. Vayavo Avraham. Avraham comes from somewhere. He comes from Beersheba, Rashi says, to Hebron, or whatever he's coming. Or is he coming from the Akedas Yitzchak? Okay, it doesn't matter. Vayavo Avraham. But take a look at the next 3 words. Lispod, lisavra, v'liv kota. How would you translate those words? He came to eulogize, and everybody asks, huh? That's not the way it works. That's not the human reaction. You cry, then you eulogize. If you're told that your relative has passed away, you don't give the eulogy right away. What do? You cry. And the Rav is bothered by this as well. The natural response has to be crying first. And what are you telling me? He was not normal? Avram wasn't like everybody else? God forbid. It's the spontaneous emotional reaction is bechi, which is a convulsive and compulsive shriek resulting from pain of tragedy, right? The eulogy is not an emotional response. The eulogy is just the opposite. What's a eulogy? It's an intellectual expression of loss. It's realizing that the life of your loved one is no longer, and you are to assess what that meant to you during that person's life and how you're to live your life accordingly after the person has passed on. If this is correct, what had to come first? Crying, not eulogy, right? It says, "Lispod l'Sara," he eulogized her and then he cried. If this is correct, how could Avram have reversed the order and offered the eulogy, which is an intellectual assessment, first? And the Rav notes that no doubt Avram was as human as anyone else. He was as human as the next person. He clearly cried when he was informed that Sarah died. His beloved partner was snatched from him. Tears, definitely. Emotional response, definitely. On an individual level, the blow was unbearable, and he expressed his loss with tremendous tears. But what the Torah is teaching us by inverting the order is to tell us that Avram realized that Sarah's passing had not just an individual impact upon him, it had a communal impact. It was not just a local individual crisis. It was a crisis for humanity. She was Avram's partner in creating the covenantal community. And without her, the covenantal community lost its leadership. This realization was so grave that it had to be expressed first. He's now noting to everybody, my wife's death is not only my loss, it's your loss. He's inverting the order to let the world know that he realizes that the Masorah, the chain of Masorah, has been impacted by her death. In other words, he first mourned the mother of the Masorah, and only afterwards does he mourn the wife he loved so much, the beloved wife. The Rav noted that grammatically, this very idea is being alluded to as well. It should have written lifkot aleha, to cry over her, but it says lifkota, which the Rav notes is a transitive verb, suggesting that the subject and the object are one. That would mean Avram and Sarah were the same person. There was a unity of identity between the two. By using this expression, lifkota, and rather than lifkot alel, to cry over her, Avram is teaching us that he was crying for whom? By using this expression, we are told that Avram wasn't just crying for Sarah, he was also crying for himself. For part of him died with her passing, which is what we noted at the beginning introduction, right? The Masorah community is impacted with her death. The Rav notes over and over that the Masorah leadership needs both a man and a woman. It can't be led just by a man. With Sarah's death, Avram's position ends as well. The lifkota, the transitive verb, it's both Avram and Sarah that are impacted by the loss of Sarah. Continue on to Pasuk Gimel.
Why is the cuff tiny?
Oh, that's the numerous different perspectives. Did he cry? There are those that suggest that it was very personal. The lifkota, his cry, not, you should know, it was a personal, like, you can't see that. You can't, right? There's the emotional loss. Others suggest that he didn't allow himself, just the opposite. He didn't allow himself to demonstrate the emotional component. He was restrictive, self-restrictive on his emotional expression of her death. Either way, but it's suggesting something about the lifkota, right? Okay. But the Rav doesn't focus on that, so I skipped that as well. But I wanted to what you're seeing is the Rav has pictured this Torah telling us numerous things, right? It's giving us a eulogy for Sarah. It's telling us that without Sarah, Avram feels totally lost because the covenantal Masorah needs both man and women. And we are told exactly who Sarah was and why he chose Kiryat Arba. Now, Pasuk Gimel. He gives the eulogy and then he gets up, right? Vayakom, take a look at what happens. Pasuk Gimel. Vayakom Avram me'al pnei Mesa. And Avram rises, he rose from the presence of his dead. The word Vayakom is crucial because in the morning experience, remember I told you at the very beginning that this Aliyah, the Rav says, number one, we learn about Jewish cemetery and what the cemetery looks like. We also learn about 100% about how to mourn. Vayakom, the mourning experience indicates that the most intense part of the mourning is over. By stating that Avram stood, it indicates that Avram heroically ended his personal mourning right then and there. He had to carry on. You can get, if you allow, as the Rambam says, a person who doesn't mourn at all, who doesn't mourn Shiva and Shloshim, it's an Achzari, a person that's cold-blooded without any emotions. A person that mourns more than Chazal suggested for a parent, 12 months, for a regular relative, the other relatives, 30 days. If he continues or she continues mourning, and they're not capable of what Avram did, Vayakom, getting up from the morning and carrying on, the Rambam calls that a fool. He's a fool. She's a fool. Life has to carry on beyond the grave after you've buried your loved one. By stating that Avram stood up, it indicates that Avram heroically ended his personal mourning in order to negotiate with Bnei Ches for the first grave for the Jewish people, right? Mourning is characterized by the inability to stand erect. What do we say? What does the mourner have to do? He sits low on the low chair. He doesn't stand for, by the way, the halacha is fascinating. The halacha is that if the Gadol Hador walks in to be Menachem, a person that's sitting Shiva, is the Avos to rise? Never. The Aval never rises. He never stands. She never stands. I heard numerous stories about Rav Soloveitchik being Menachem Avelim, and the people couldn't say a word. Oh my God, Rabbi Soloveitchik's here, and they would, they'd freeze. And the Rav would wait, and the Rav would wait. But nobody should ever stand up for anybody, right? If you're an Avel, then Avel being able to stand up only occurs when? After the Avelus is over. Then you're able to stand up erect. And what I always point out, when you sit, is there motion? No, you can't move anywhere. When you're seated, there's no future, if you will. There's present, but there's no future, correct? You're not able to move. I'm here. That's seated. The seated position is you're not moving, you're not creative. The standing position is creativity. There's movement, there's a future. By Yakum, he gets up heroically, and he's now going to do what? He's going to leave me al panei meso. He gets up from his morning, and what does he do? He negotiates a real estate deal, correct?
So where's Sarah this time?
Sara's, her body is being held wherever in the mortuary, right? Her body is in the mortuary at the Chever Kadisha, correct? That's exactly what's happening. Mourning is characterized in the inability to stand erect. By standing erect, Avraham regains human dignity. It's so sad, but what happens with the human being when he mourns, when she mourns? The human dignity is taken away from us in the truth sense of the word, right? We're broken. This is what we're going to end up being buried into the ground. This is our future. Is this what we stand for? It is human dignity is removed from us. Vayakom, Avram gets up and he regains the human dignity. He understood that he had to rise for the future of our community, of our covenantal community, because it depended upon him now that Sarah was gone. When we end Shiva, what do we say? By the way, at the end of Shiva, the last day of Shiva, we say, Kumu, rise. That after we say Amakom Yanachem, the last thing we say to the Avelim is literally Kumu, stand up, regain your human dignity, carry on. I often tell the story, my personal story of my father's yahrzeit will be just next month, 2 months, Yud Beis Teves, and my father 36 years, and I never forget. One of the things that you don't do halachically because of kibud ava aim is you never sit in your parents' seat at the table. If your father or your mother sit at a specific seat at the table, you're never to sit in their seat. our dining room table, always my father, Zichrono Livracha, sat at the front of the table. He was at the head of the table, and we were seated all around. And my mother sat at the other end of the table, always. My father, the Shiva, the Shabbos of Shiva, my mother turned to my oldest brother, Yosef. I'm 3 out of 4. Yosef is the oldest, and she said to him, now it's your turn to fill this place. Now you sit in Abba's seat. You're to carry on. That's the Vayakom. You don't mourn. You got to get up and you got to sit. And what do we say? Hamakom yenachem. When I've pointed out, yes, it's Jewish, but it's true. Hamakom yenachem. When you fill the place of the one who has gone to their eternal rest, when you don't leave a lacuna, when you carry on their legacy, yenachem, then you'll be comforted. But if you leave the place empty, you're never going to fill. There's never going to be nechama. There's never going to be a sense of consolation, right? Mm-hmm. You got to carry on the legacy of the deceased. Interesting, the Rav notes, Ibn Israel cryptically says, Me'al Pnei Meso, Vayakam Me'al Pnei Meso. What's Me'al Pnei Meso? From his dead, right? Vayakam, he stood up, Me'al Pnei Meso. And the Ibn Ezra says, cryptically, these are the words he says. He stood up from Sarah's body. Huh? What is he alluding to? And the Rav noted, Ibn Ezra is brilliant. He's telling us that Avram realized that Sarah was physically dead, but her legacy was alive and well and kicking, if you will. There was a future, a wonderful future for Klal Yisrael. And Ibn Ezra is alluding to this. Me'al Pnei Meso means he physically got up from her body, meaning, yes, the body is dead, but her legacy is continuing. As soon as Avram came to terms with that, there was no need to continue mourning. He was able now to do what? As soon as you come to terms with the fact that your loved one is still alive from their legacy, mourning ends and the future occurs. It is true. It's what does Chazal say? Yaakov lo mace. That's what Chazal says. Vayechi Yaakov. Vayechi Yaakov is the last parsha in the Chumash Bereshis. Vayechi Yaakov, it's telling the story of Yaakov's death. And when Chazal say, why does it say Vayechi? He's alive. So the Gemara says, Yaakov lo mace. Yaakov never died. Of course, Yaakov never died. I'll prove it to you. We're here learning Yaakov's Torah, right? We're still learning Torah. Tell me, is Yaakov dead? The Jewish people are here, still here, no matter how they try to destroy us. And we're watching this all over again, right in front of our eyes. It is wild. It is crazy. It's nerve-wracking. It's very scary because we know how it occurred just 80 years ago. But we're realized the truth is Netzach Yisrael lo yishaker, as the Navi Yeshaya says. The eternity of the Jewish people is not a falsehood. We're here. We're still here, right? Vayakom Avraham me'al pnei meso. Her body may have been dead, but she wasn't dead. Her legacy lived on. Now let's take a look. Now begins the negotiation for the purchase of Maras HaMachpelah. So the first part of the Aliyah, I would say, is the eulogy for Sara Imenu. We get an assessment, objective, because it's God's assessment, who Sara really was. This unique, combined human persona of an adult and a child all wrapped in one, correct? A beautiful picture of a real personality. It's not a split personality. It's a unified personality. So many of us are split personalities. You know, sometimes we're old, sometimes we're young. No, she was young and old all at the same time. And then we saw how he eulogized and then cried because he realized her death was more than just an individual tragedy. It was a communal tragedy. And now, so he has to now do what? He has to now buy the piece of land. He has to negotiate with B'nai Ches. I want to buy Maras HaMachpelah. Take a look at Pasuk Gimel Dalet. Ger v'toshav anochi imachem. So now he's talking. Avram is talking, and he has to introduce himself, if you will, because he has to let them know. But they knew who he was. You'll see they know. How do they know? Because they call him Nisi Elohim Atah. We know you're a prince of God. He was very well known. Avram had already gained a reputation that was international. They were more than honored to have this individual negotiate with them for a piece of land. But he says, ger, what's a ger? A foreigner, a stranger, a toshav. What's a toshav? A citizen. So Chazal wanted to know, ger v'toshav. I'm a stranger and I'm a citizen. Excuse me. Either you get bounced out of this country by ISIS because you don't have your citizenship, or you're a citizen, correct? What are you? You're an, right? Ger v'toshav anochi imachem. This is what Chazal need to understand. What does it mean when Avram said to Bnei Ches, I am both a ger and a toshav? So Rashi gives one approach. The Rav's approach is totally different. The Rav approach is these two words offer us an insight into the attitude of the Jew towards modern civilization. It's typical Rav that you're going to hear now. His approach is, what does the Jew vis-a-vis the world mean? What is our approach to the world? And here I'm quoting the Rav. These are the Rav's words. What is our position vis-a-vis modern civilization with respect to science, to Western culture, to the countries in which we live? The answer is enshrined in two words in the Torah, these two words. Certainly, I'm a resident. I'm one of you. I engage as business as you do. I speak your language. I take full part in your social economic institutions. But at the same time, I'm a ger. I'm a stranger. And in some respects, a foreigner. I belong to a particular world, one that is completely foreign to you. It is a world in which I am at one with the Creator. It is a world populated by characters unknown to you, with a tradition that you do not understand. This is what we tell the world. You do not understand, with spiritual values that seem impractical in your eyes. It is a world full of altars and sacrifices, a world of Torah, of loving kindness, of sanctity, and of purity. You live life differently. You pray differently. Your conception of charity is different from ours. Your days of rest are different from ours, and so on and so on. In these matters, I'm a stranger in your world, and you are strangers in mine. Jewish burial is one of the elements with respect to which we are strangers and foreigners to one another. A Jew dies and is buried differently than a non-Jew. A Jew requires a cemetery of his own, a Jewish grave. That's the end of the Rav's beautiful understanding of what did Avram mean when he introduced himself with these contradictory words. Ger v'toshav. It's the Jew vis-a-vis the world. On the one hand, I'm a toshav. I participate in your world. I involved in business with you, etc., etc. On the other hand, I'm a ger. You look at me and you don't understand my religion. There are these, what's his name? Tucker Carlson, such an anti-Semite. It's unbelievable. But if you listen to him, he can't understand how there can be gering. What's a ger? If you're different than me, you're no good. He's afraid of diversity. And Avram was saying, the world is made up of diversity. I'm a ger, but yet I'm a toshav. We share human dignity with each other, but yet we have different approaches to different things, different faith. Our faiths are different. That's fine. We can live together because we're human. We can have differences, but you can tolerate and celebrate. The Avram is telling the world, celebrate our differences by saying ger v'toshav. Celebrate that which unites us and celebrate our differences. Respect our differences. That's exactly what Avram is teaching us. Take a look. So what do they say? What's their response? Pasuk Vav. Shma'enu Adoni. What does that mean? We hear you. What do you mean hear? Right? Shma'enu Adoni. Shma'enu Adoni. Nisi Elokim Atah b'sochenu. B'mivchar kivarenu kivaras meisecha. Hear us, my Lord. They're turning now to Avram and they say, Shma'enu, please listen to us. Why Nisi Elokim? We know exactly who you are. You're a very important dignitary. We're honored by your presence. Do you want to buy a piece of real estate in our territory? You are a prince of God in our midst. In the choicest of burial places, bury your dead. But be among us, they say. Avram was honestly respected as a great man with dignity. He was a dignitary in their eyes. The Hittites, the Bnei Ches, deeply respected him as a prince. And that's why they wanted him to bury Sara where? Yeah. In their cemetery. In their cemetery. This, they felt, would be Avram's approval of their lifestyle. If Avram buries Sara in their cemetery, what has he done? He's given a stempel of approval, if you will, right? A stamp of approval for their lifestyle. And Avram could never do that because Avram said, I'm a ger. There are things that separate us. The Rav recounted the following story that he heard from the famous Rothschild family in France. And I remember the Rav telling us this story. When French Premier Charles de Gaulle was informed that the Rothschild family was planning to transfer Edmund James D. Rothschild's remains to Eretz Yisrael, he's buried in Zichron Yaakov, the famous, beautiful cemetery in Zichron Yaakov, his own. He became indignant. De Gaulle got very angry and he said, I always thought that Rothschild was a good Frenchman. Now I realize I was mistaken. Who's a good Frenchman, de Gaulle said? One who's reared in France, educated in French schools, whose native tongue is French, and who's ready to take up arms to defend France, and who is buried in France. The same philosophy was expounded by Bnei Ches to Avram, right? Since you are a prince in our midst, since you are a Hittite prince, we believe that you should bury your loved one where? In our cemeteries, right? What do you mean? Listen to us, they were saying to Avram. Shma'enu, listen to what we have to say. You are a prince. You are ours. Bury your wife with our princes, right? Don't bury them separately. She belongs in the choices of our sepulchres, not outside. By refusing their offer, Avram was letting them know that the Jew is different, right? Their Jew is a ger. The Jew is a toshav, but the Jew is a ger. So he says to them, Pasuk Tes, he listens, right? And he says, no, guys, that's not the way it's going to look. We're going to work. I'm going to buy it from Ephron Hachiti, the person who owns this plot of land. I am interested in this plot of land. Pasuk Tes, v'yiten li es maras hamachpelah asher lo, asher biksei sadeu, b'chesef malei noli b'sofechem la'achuzas kever. Here's Pasuk Tes. He responds what a Jewish cemetery needs to be. Let him grant me the cave of Machpelah. I thank you very much. It's very kind of you to offer the nicest plots in your cemeteries. That's not what I want. I want to buy the Maras HaMachpelah, which is, by the way, where? He tells them exactly where. Asher lo, asher biksei sadeu. It's at the edge of the field. Then he says, what is he going to do? The kesef molei nula. I'm going to pay every penny for it. You're not giving this to me as a gift. B'sochechem, amongst you, I'm going to pay. I'm going to give you la'achuzas kever. I want the achuzas kever. So the Rav points out there are two distinct requests that Avram is making in this pasuk. What are they? A, he wants a secluded field, correct? He does not want to be buried in their cemeteries. Not only does he not want to be buried in the cemetery, he wants our cemetery to be secluded. Isn't that the way it is in all, right? 98%. Sometimes we can't get the piece of land, so we're next to them. But even when you're next to them, in their grave, there's down in Orange County, you have the grave, the cemetery. So the Jewish cemetery is a part of, it's a secluded part of the cemetery. It's fenced off by hedge, by literally by trees. Either you're going to build a fence, or you're going to build a fence with trees, right? With hedges. They have hedges all around. Why does it have to be? Because the Jewish cemetery has to be secluded. And number two, that so he wants our own cemetery. What else does he want? He wants to pay for it. He doesn't want a grant. He doesn't want a gift. Why does he want a grant? Take the gift. Very nice. Ephron's going to be nice. He's going to give it to you for free. Because if he gives it to us for free, he's worried. Avram is worried that there will be mental reservations in Ephron's mind, in Bnei Chase's mind, who really owns that property, right? That it would invalidate the sale. It would invalidate the gift, because he'll always think it's not really Avram and Bnei Israel's. It's whose? It's Ephron still, right? And Avram wants this purchase to demonstrate that the Jewish commitment to the land of Eretz Yisrael is unwavering. The Ramban says something very, very, very important about this. The Ramban says, why was this story so important? Because we are purchasing Eretz Yisrael. We're purchasing a piece of land in Israel. We don't give up no matter what they want. The world says, I'm always mind-boggling if you think about it. How many Muslim countries are there in the world?
Many.
I think there's, I might be wrong, but there's no, more than that. There are more than 20 countries that are Muslim. And how many Jewish countries are there? One little country that on the globe, on the map, you can't even fit the name in the piece of land. It doesn't fit in there on a regular map. It's so small. One little country. That's all we ask. Leave us alone. One little country. The world can't leave us alone. If you doubt Jewish history for a moment, I say this all the time. Why am I a believer? I'm a believer because, like Yaakov Emden says, what is the greatest, Yaakov Emden says this in the Hakdama to his Siddur. He says, what is the greatest miracle in Jewish history? It's not Kriyas Yamsuf. It's not Matan Torah. It's none of that. You know what the greatest miracle of Jewish history is? That we're still here. That we're still here. We shouldn't be here. Logic dictates that we shouldn't be here, right? You know why I personally believe what motivates me to be about Emunah in Judaism? It's because that very reason. Look at Eretz Yisrael. We shouldn't be here. We shouldn't be in Eretz Yisrael. It makes no sense. Why do I believe? Because this one little country is the focus of everybody's concern. It's on the front page of the news every day. It's one little country. And there are thousands of other countries. And it's one mass of land that is so small. It's unbelievable. Yep. It is the focus. They're not talking about Somalia, right? Okay, they're not talking about all of the other problems in the world. They're not. They're not even talking about what China does wrong to its people. It's just the Uyghurs. Yeah. What's even the fight, the war between Russia and Ukraine pales in comparison to the interest that they have with Gaza. Huh? That's the proof. Judaism, about Mammon. Yeah, there's something unique about us people, right? So he wants us to have this piece of land for numerous reasons. Number one, our grave has to be segregated. And number two, we have to own it. And number three, the Ramban says it teaches us our commitment to Eretz Yisrael. Continue on now. Take a look. So what does he buy? Take a look at this. It's fascinating. Jump to Pasuk Yud Zayin. Vayokom asher b'machpelah, hasodeh v'hama'ara asher bo v'chol ha'etz asher b'sodeh asher b'chol gvulo saviv. What does he do? Right? Vayokom, he's take a look, 17, and Ephron's field, which was in Machpelah, facing, we're told exactly where it was. We're told all of the details in Maras Machpelah. Maras Machpelah faces Mamre, the field and the cave within it, and all the trees in the field. Avram is delineating exactly what he's buying within all its surrounding boundaries. That's what I'm purchasing, right? The Rav noted that the story of Machpelah taught us how a Jewish cemetery is to be created. I told you that at the beginning. These are the words of the Rav. Two requirements are essential. Number one, the Jewish cemetery must be separated from non-Jewish graves with clear boundaries. To this day, as I pointed out to you, a fence always surrounds a Jewish cemetery. Number two, only the Jewish community may own the cemetery. Avram is teaching us only the Jewish community may own the cemetery. Pasuk Yutes, va'achareichen kavar Avram esar ishto. So he buys it, right? He pays top-notch dollar for it. Va'achareichen, after all this, Avram buries his wife. Emarat sedei hamachpelah al pnei mamrehi Chevron be'eretz Canaan. Avraham, this story teaches us the stringency of burying our dead only in a Jewish cemetery. If one was buried in a non-Jewish cemetery, the Rav taught us, we must do everything we can in our power to reinter that person in a Jewish cemetery. I had a shaila about this, not the chayalim, about a whole story about a family with a body in South Africa, and it was wild. It just about a half a year ago, and I called Rav Rimon. We talked it out exactly what to instruct the family. They got to reinter the body into a Jewish cemetery. It wasn't in a Jewish cemetery. You got to return, if at all possible, you got to do that. This was what Avram is teaching us. If one's buried in a non-Jewish cemetery, we must do everything that is in our capability to reinter that body in a Jewish cemetery. The Rav would quote his grandfather, Reb Chaim, who taught that this was so essential that if this happened and the only person who was available to do the reinterment is a Kohen does it. A Kohen never goes to the cemetery. A Kohen never touches a dead body, right? Never is in the same building as, that's tameh. That defiles him. If he is the only one that can move the body, he moves it because we consider it a mace mitzvah. What's a mace mitzvah? Where nobody else is present. He's the onus falls on him. That's how important it is. A Jew is to be buried in a Jewish cemetery, not in a non-Jewish cemetery, not in a non-sectarian cemetery.
Soldiers.
A Jew,
That's a problem.
it's a big problem. It's a big problem. This Project Benjamin, they can't get the bodies out. So at least they put up a kever, a matzeva that's Jewish, right? Yeah. But it's a big problem. We really should try to get it, but we can't. You can't. Now, the last puzzle call.
Jewish soldiers in America?
Yeah, Jewish from World War II in particular were buried after the Battle of the Bulge and after the Normandy. They were buried in many, got killed on this, so quickly. We're talking about thousands of soldiers were killed on charging in Normandy, that they just buried them. And quite often they buried without realizing that they were Jewish. So their tags, their dog tags weren't there because they were afraid. So dog tags, so they're buried like Christians. So they put up a cross. So we've done, there's a project called Project Benjamin, where they go and where they realize that the person has a cross on their grave, but it's really a Jew. And it's a whole long process. Rabbi J.J. Shafter is very involved. Rabbi Dr. Norman Lamsey, son, Shalom, is the one who really runs this. And they try to change the matzevas. But even more than the matzeva, what's Reb Chaim telling us? Reb Chaim saying, if at all possible, you got to reinter the body. But that's not happening in these cemeteries. So they do the best that they can. Okay, the last pasuk to this story. Vayokom hasodeh va'amara asher bo la'avron la'achuzas kever me'es b'nei ches. Thus, the field with its cave was confirmed as Avram's, as an estate for a burial site. Achuzas kever, from the children of Chet. Right? He got it. So the Rav suggested that why is this such a repetition? We were already told he bought the land. This pasuk seems to be totally superfluous, right? Because we were already told Avram bought it from Bnei Ches. So why do you have the repetition of the story that Avram purchased the land, including the field, including the trees, and everything around the cave was where Sarah was buried? You already told me this. So the Rav says it's very important from a legal standpoint. There are two types of real estate transfers in halacha. There's what we call a stay mikneh. A stay mikneh means property that one easily buys and easily sells. You buy a piece of property, you buy a condo, an apartment, already a piece of land. You buy it, you pay your money, you own it. It could be gone tomorrow. It doesn't remain. There is no connection with the land except that you paid for it financially. It's a land that you can flip outright. You can flip, no problem. Quick business deal. That's a stay mikneh. That's a stay mikneh. But then there's a stay achuza. Notice what he calls it here in this pasuk. La achuzas kever. What's a stay achuza? That's a real estate deal that one is attached to emotionally. One inherits a stay achuza. Ma'aras hamachpela changed its identity from a stay mikneh to a stay achuza, where Sara is interred. That's why the Torah gives us the exact detail about this piece of real estate. We're told definitively exactly what was included. We are told it faced Mamre. We are told that it was once owned by Bnei Ches. We are told it includes the trees. We are told it's at the end of the property, right? Why all of this? To emphasize it's a stay achuza. It's not just a regular real estate. It is Jewish inheritance. It's ours for eternity. And I once again repeat, the Ramban notes that this whole story is the Baruch Hu's promise that the land of Avraham and his family will be Eretz Yisrael, and we will inherit it. And that's why we fight for it. That's why we fight for it, right? Eretz Yisrael is that it's our land. It's not a colony. We're not colonists. We are the indigenous people. And that's what's so important. Maybe that's what this whole last pasuk 16. We're the indigenous people. And that we shouldn't forget. And that we shouldn't let the world forget. It's nonsense that this is a battle of colonies. Okay, so to wrap up, Chayei Sara, second look at the opening Aliyah is to teach us, number one, we have a eulogy from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So it's objective truth, not subjective truth at point one. Point two, right? We're told all about who Sarah was. Point two, we're told about how Avraham negotiated a deal because a Jewish cemetery must be uniquely segregated and it must be owned by the Jews. Correct? Those are the things that are being taught in this Aliyah. And third, we're being taught that Avraham, after his wife's death, realizes that he's half of the person, if you will, not even half. He can't even continue on. He's only going to do two things. One, this story, and the next story, which is going to occupy the rest of Parshas Parshas Chayei Sara. It's the longest perek in Chumash Bereshis, 67 psukim, which is finding Rivka for Yitzchak. Okay? Okay, we'll continue next week on the next Parsha.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
Just as is it a medrash that Eishes Chayil was?
Yes,
was
the
that
Medrash
one?
says Eishes Chayil was the hesped that Avram gave for his Sarah. Why? How does Eishes Chayil? Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Dalet, Hey.
Right.
He used every letter in the alphabet to express his adoration of his wife.
Wow.
He couldn't find enough to say about her. That's what Chazal is taking to say by that medrash. Was Eishes Chayil the hesped? No, but that's what Chazal wanted us to understand.
Well, it's a beautiful thing
Yeah.
that last forever.
Yeah.
Is on everybody as someone knows
Right.
Kever. You put
Eishes
put
Chayil,
part
sure,
of Eishes
beautiful.
Chayil.
It's from Mishlei. Okay.
Beautiful.
Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thanks. Have a
Have a
great
lovely
Thank you
day.
very much.
Have a
Thank
lovely
you.
day.
You
Thank
too.
you.
Thanks.